last normal class. Wow. Wow. We're at the terminus. Isn't that exciting?
Yes.
You're done with college already?
No, I want to be done with college already.
Not me. I like college.
I want to get, and I just want to move jumping and get some job.
Got it. Okay, so who can tell me about Tuskegee? What?
Airmen?
Well, there were some people that became airmen, but I'm thinking about the Tuskegee study. No.
You will know as soon as you start talking.
Wow.
I don't remember what you said.
Tuskegee syphilis. Does that ring any bells?
Oh, they gave a certain number of people syphilis, but they didn't tell them. They wanted to see like how they react with it.
It's not quite that horrible.
Okay.
So, although it sort of is that horrible. So, this is after the Nuremberg Code had been put out as a result of the atrocities during World War II. And there was a study in the Deep South where they wanted to follow the progression of syphilis. And would that be a useful thing to do, to follow syphilis and see what happens to people as they, become more affected by syphilis? It's very useful. I mean, if you know how people are degenerating, you can potentially come up with, I was going to say compensation, but that's not really the right word. With ways for them to overcome some potential limitations. Syphilis will end up killing you if let it run its full course. So they had a whole bunch of individuals and from an African American community, and they got a bunch of basically poor, rural African American males to participate in this study. They didn't give people syphilis. Some of the guys had it, some of the guys didn't. So they wanted to follow the progression of syphilis in those individuals who had it and those who didn't. See what's going to happen and how those individuals are going to differ as a function of time. Valuable, potentially. Initially, I believe that they were going to try some type of treatment, but then funding fell through, so they just decided, okay, instead of doing an experiment, we're just going to follow these people. So if they're just following people and recording some dependent variables, what type of study would that be? Would that be an experiment, correlational, quasi-experimental? Correlational. It's just a correlational study. So if you hear people talking about the Tuskegee experiment, you can chastise them and tell them, no, it's a correlational study. Anyway, so you have a bunch of African American men. Some of them have syphilis, some of them don't. And they're following the progression of the disease. And they tell these males that have it that they have bad blood. So they don't say that they have syphilis, just that you have bad blood. And this might make a little bit of sense. If you've ever went to a doctor's office for some problem that you have, the diagnoses can be very difficult to understand. You have a myocardial infarction. What's that? I don't know. You have a heart attack. Oh, okay, I got it. Right? So lots of times doctors will simplify their language to make it understandable to people. So they simplify things and say that you just have bad blood. What's the problem with telling people that they have bad blood when they have syphilis? You can spread it, but you might get the idea that you could spread bad blood.
Never get treatment for it.
Yeah, if I know that I have syphilis, and at some point there's some stories going around, oh, there's this cure for syphilis, then you could be like, oh, I have that, I could go get treated. Does that make sense? So at some point there was a cure for syphilis, and there still is. You guys know what it is? Yeah, which one? Which is the famous antibiotic? Penicillin. So penicillin was discovered, and holy cow, it treats syphilis, it cures it. Syphilis goes bye-bye. And at this point, if you're doing a research study and you're following people that have syphilis and there's a cure for syphilis, what should you do? Tell them, yeah, oh, hey, you guys actually have syphilis and there's this cure available, so you might think about wanting to get it. That would make sense, that would be nice. Maybe they're not going to provide the syphilis, because that wasn't part of the original study. One part of the original thing is that they were going to give these individuals free medical care, so you come in, you get some blood drawn, and spinal taps. I had viral meningitis when I was in graduate school, and I had a spinal tap and started leaking fluid. It was just miserable. I never want another spinal tap. Anyway, so in exchange for getting blood draws and spinal taps, they were given medical care. And they were given like death insurance. So if you die, you're going to get some money to bury you. Woohoo! Now these are poor rural individuals who don't have a whole lot of money. So these are pretty reasonable incentives for them. They're going to get access to doctors that they wouldn't see otherwise. They're going to get some money that's going to help their families in the eventuality that they die, right? So there's a lot of things that they might not get otherwise. So thinking about these things that they might not get otherwise, would this be undue influence or coercion? What's the difference between undue influence and coercion? We've talked a little bit about undue influence already.
Undue influences and that were like confining their price where they would do pretty much anything, and coercion is where you keep like pestering and arguing and trying to convince them that the price you already have is the right one.
Yeah, sort of. So with undue influence, I like this idea of finding the price, right? So the idea that everyone has their price. So you want to participate in the study, I'll give you 20 bucks. No, you don't want to do it, I'll give you 100 bucks. Yeah, you'll do it. If I give you a big enough incentive, then you'll do something that you don't necessarily want to do otherwise, right? So undue influence has to do with providing people some benefits that they aren't going to receive otherwise. What's coercion? How is coercion different? So she said it's taking a price and making that price worth it. So I mean, if I say you're going to get 20 bucks for participating in the experiment, how do I make 20 bucks worth it?
You can like say all the good that the experiment would do and how the data that you could contribute could save lives in the end, and like.
And you're just not up for it. You're like, forget that. Because all those things are sort of like incentives. You'll be contributing. You can feel pride, right? That's an incentive. Pride for helping the scientific machine.
Maybe more of saying things that will happen that in reality doesn't, maybe? Kind of like a used car salesman. This car is nice, it runs well, but in all reality it's going to fall apart.
So that's just lying. Coercion is something different. Coercion is getting someone to buy that car, even though they don't want that car. Rape is coerced sex. How do you coerce someone to have sex with you?
You keep badgering.
Oh please, oh please. I'm sure the no's would just continue, right?
Or attack.
Attack. I can physically force you. I can, put a gun to your head. Do this or you're gonna die. That's coercion. When you are threatening someone with something negative, you're engaged in coercion. So undue influence is offering something positive in exchange for participation. Coercion is something negative. So imagine that I wanted you guys to participate in my students' research projects, and I wanted to coerce you to do that. Instead, I offered extra credit, which could be considered undue influence, but I gave you another alternative, right? Because I didn't want that to unduly influence you. You had a number of ways that you could get that credit. How could I coerce you to participate?
Take it or you fail.
To what?
Right, that's what's failing.
Yeah, if you don't participate in these experiments, you're failing. Or I'm going to reduce your grade by, one letter. That's coercion. Okay, so what does this involve? The offering the money for burial, free lunches, yay. Healthcare, is this coercion or undue influence? Potentially undue influence. Okay, so they have these individuals, the penicillin cure comes out, the individuals have no idea that they have syphilis necessarily, and then potentially they can't get the cure, but some of them figure this out. And if you figured out that you actually had syphilis and that there was a cure for syphilis, what would you do? You'd try to go get that cure, right? And penicillin is cheap, so it's not that crazy expensive or anything. And here's where things get really, really messed up. So the researchers had put out a list of people that the pharmacists were not supposed to give penicillin to. So you could be participating in this study know that you have syphilis, know that there's a cure out there, try to go get it and be refused. That's horrible. It does sound illegal. Different times, different times. So what problems does this study have? We have potential undue influence. What other things?
Forced continuation, like they don't have the ability to opt out because they're blocked from it.
Yeah, and this represents a lack of respect for participants. So on question number, what is this? I think it's question number 6. I've got 3 answers: beneficence, justice, non-maleficence, and respect for persons. And these 4 ideas are probably the biggest ideas that guide the things that we do. And when we respect our participants, we do certain things. Now, the idea of respect is an indication that you have dignity. You are worthy of being treated like a human being, right? So if I give you respect, what do? I'm going to allow you to make a decision about whether or not you want to participate. And if I told you that if you're going to stay in the study, you're not going to be able to receive, to get the penicillin, would you still like to continue? I mean, at that point, at least they're making an informed decision about whether they're participating or not, right? But that was never given an option. So that's showing a lack of respect. By not telling people that they actually have syphilis, that's showing a lack of respect. What is stopping people from getting cured? What is that? Is that a lack of respect? Is that justice? Is that beneficence? Or is that non-maleficence? Which one of those is that related to? It's related to maleficence, right? That's hurting people. And so even though they didn't give the individuals who were in the study syphilis, what happened as a result of them not allowing these individuals to get cured? They died from it. What else?
I guess when they suffered for a while.
Yes. What else?
They pass it on to
They
our-
passed it on. They passed it on. So you just have that blood. No worries. Go, go get married, go have kids, go have fun. And so they ended up spreading syphilis through the community because they weren't being treated for this. That's hugely maleficent. That's a lot of bad stuff. What is justice? So beneficence, it's basically providing some benefit. In studying syphilis, that provides some benefit, absolutely. Justice, though, what's just? If something is just, what does that mean? Fair. Fair. Not necessarily equal, but fair. To everyone their fair share. Does anyone play World of Warcraft online?
I have friends.
Like there are missions, and if you beat certain things, you get loot, right? So how do you, if you and some friends go off and you beat something, how do you distribute the loot?
I don't know.
Just mine for gold.
It's going around.
So if you are doing a mission and you're finding someone, who should get the most? Whoever does the most, right? If someone is making more contributions, they should receive more of the benefit. So the idea with research being just is that the individuals who are paying the costs of the research are the ones who are receiving the benefit of the research. So now let's consider those individuals who are paying the costs of this research. So you have a whole bunch of African American males, and what benefit are they getting from this research? Getting health screens, but that's actually not a benefit of the research itself. That's a benefit of, that's part of the undue influence potentially. No, that's part of the undue influence too. Maybe there's some knowledge that someday, I mean, think about it. If the individuals that are being studied are all African Americans and this study produces some knowledge, will African Americans potentially benefit from this knowledge? Yeah. Who else is going to benefit from this knowledge? Potentially. Let's assume, because when research is done, it's done often to make generalizations, right? We want to learn something about syphilis in people, not just syphilis in poor, rural, South African Americans, right? We want to learn about syphilis in people. So who else benefits? White people benefit. All sorts of people that can benefit from this. Who paid the costs? The African Americans primarily. So is it just? No. Think about the Nazi experiments. Who paid the costs in those? Jews, homosexuals, gypsies. Go down your list of groups that aren't liked, and you'll find a lot of those individuals paying the costs. Who's going to benefit from those experiments? Nazis. The Nazis were. White people were. Woohoo! Is that just? No. Big problem with justice there. So an ethical study is going to be one where the costs for the research are going to be paid by the individuals who are benefiting. And if you think about the medical research that I participated in, who is primarily paying the costs of that research? What type of people were participating? Get a couple grand for a couple weeks. Poor college students, and just poor people in general. There weren't a lot of people who were really well off. Who's going to potentially benefit from this? Researchers, participants, I don't know. I'm not sure I've benefited from. I mean, I've gotten my undue influence benefit. So that one, it was to create a patch that's going to get people off of heroin. So who's going to benefit? People on heroin? People who need that? Are these going to be poor people, rich people? What type of people are they? Are they going to be poor college students and people that are destitute? Some of them. But how much are these patches going to cost? Who's going to get these patches? Who's suffered from a medical issue and hasn't gotten treated for it? People without insurance. So people who are doing well off are going to be the ones that have the insurance that are going to be able to afford this. So you have this lack of justice. Even if you think about research that's done on college campuses, who's serving or who's paying the majority of the costs? College students. And who's benefiting? Hopefully everybody, right? So lots of problems with justice. Help us off at night. So speaking of problems with justice, if we have a problem with justice, what type of validity problem are we going to have? It's interesting because we talk about it from an ethical standpoint, but lots of times ethical issues have practical repercussions. No. Not construct validity. On their external? Yes, external validity. Why? How does having an unjust design affect external validity? You have less of an ability to generalize, right? Because if we're going to do everything perfectly, we're going to randomly sample from the population that could potentially benefit, right? But if we're not completely randomly sampling, if we're just using college students, then it's possible that what we're learning about college students might not generalize to the entire population. So if you have a problem with justice, you also may have a problem with external validity. Let's talk about marijuana. So imagine that you want to do a study on marijuana use in college performance. How do you do the study? Someone design a study for me.
What kind of performance? Like on tests?
Operationalize it. You tell me the type of performance.
You just have to go people who are
Okay, so you get a bunch of people who don't mind smoking marijuana, all right, and what do you do then? Make them smoke and take tests. So that's one way that we could do it.
Get a group of people, split them in half of them smoke, half of them don't. Or I guess they both smoke, but some of them are smoking active THC and some of them are smoking just like a placebo. And then they take a test again and then see how that affects their score.
Yeah, so we could do an experiment like this. I would guess that doing an experiment like this would be ridiculously hard to do. And that most studies that would be done like that, especially if undergraduates were going to look at a question of this nature for, let's say, a senior capstone project, you're not going to be buying pot for your participants, right? And think about it. Pot is illegal on the federal level. And if your university is receiving federal funding and you're using money to buy your students pot, this is big problems. So how do you do that without this? Don't do an experiment.
You have to do correlation.
Do a correlational study. What do?
Find kids who already smoke.
You get some people, you randomly, you go out to people, I'm pointing like there's a quad, I'm not even sure this whole thing is like a big quad. So you go and you get people and you figure out if they smoke pot or not. And I'm going to ask, I don't really want answers. Do you smoke pot? And they tell me you. Okay, so I get an indication of whether or not people are smoking pot. And how do I measure their performance? What's the measure of your performance that many of you are concerned about this time of the year?
Grades.
The grades, right? Is that a measure of performance? Yes. So, there are different ways that we can do this. We can do something like this. Let's say that we're going to give people a survey. Okay? So we're going to give people a survey. And we can give them a survey in a way that either is completely anonymous, where their participation is anonymous, or where their participation would be confidential. What's the difference between anonymous and confidential?
Anonymous, you don't know at all who's putting it in, but confidential is like, you know who it is, but you're not sharing that. You're not sharing identifiable information.
Identifiable information, that's right. So if I have identifiable information that links someone to their scores, whether it's about marijuana and performance, or even whether it's about a Stroop experiment, right? If I have that personally identifiable information, which I do, for those of you who participated in my Stroop, you guys sent me emails. I know. So how could you do the survey in an anonymous way? Put the survey online? That's actually a really bad way to make things like completely anonymous, because let's say that some of your students are using their cell phones or their own computers to access the survey, then it's getting the MAC address for your personal computer when you're sending those requests for information.
Do like pick random classrooms and just hand the professor the test, and at the end have like a questionnaire of whether or not you smoke.
Okay, so the instructor gets the questionnaire, and I go and I ask you, okay, Josie, do you smoke?
Sure, why not?
No. Oh, I'm not sure that you were saying sure about smoking. I thought you were saying sure. That's a way to do it anonymously. That's not a way to do it anonymously. How are you going to do it anonymously? Yeah.
You could have your sample base, but you can assign them randomized numbers instead of names and identifiable information.
Okay, so you're 27.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my answer can't be traced back to me. I'm a number, not a person. Right?
I'm not sure. Do I have your number connected to your name anywhere?
Oh. Like it was just like legit, like you have like a number, like first person I asked, yes or no.
Okay, so first person I asked, yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
But if I ask you, like, hey, you smoke, and you tell me yes or no, that's not anonymous. I know who you are.
The face is still connected to it. Why can't you send out a survey?
Okay, and how do I do it?
Mail it to every student at Eastern.
Okay, so inside everyone's dorm box, they get a survey, because I'm not going to use the USPS because that's too expensive. I'm just going to go around and stick stick the surveys in people's rooms, right? Perfect, okay? That's a great start. Now they're all out there, how do I get them? How do I get them back in a way that's anonymous?
Have them turn them into like just a box.
Yeah, you've got some box somewhere that people can go and drop things in, right? Yeah, it's perfect, that's completely anonymous. So the survey, maybe you say, what's your GPA and how much do you smoke? Maybe you don't want to do that because you're worried about people lying or inflating their GPAs, because a lot of students really don't know what their GPA is, or maybe you're interested about their GPAs in the future, right? Let's see if how much you smoke now is going to predict your grades next semester. That's an interesting question. So we do this, and we get participants information, some personally identifiable information. We have to, so we could contact that person the next semester, or so we could contact the registrar's office. You might imagine that the person signs consent to have the registrar provide me with their GPA, right? So in that situation, I have their information. Should I share that information with anyone? No, that information should stay with me. If that information stays with me, then I'm holding that information confidential. Now, there's a problem. Why would we want to keep that information confidential?
If they smoke pot and then quit and go into the corporate world to get a federal job and they found out about that, they could get a job.
Yeah, so there are some situations where maybe smoking pot is going to exclude you from things. Or maybe even things like your student aid. So it used to be this way when I was in college as a student. I'm not sure if it still is. But if you've gotten busted with pot, are you allowed to get federal student aid?
You have to click a box where it says, have you ever been arrested for, like, and then it gives like a list of things, like a really short list, like a
Yeah.
felony or like drug possession.
And if you click that box, you don't get federal aid,
Well, I
right?
don't know, I've never clicked the box.
So I believe, I don't know, I have to take a look and see if it's still the case, but it used to be the case that if you'd gotten busted for smoking pot, you would lose all of your federal grants and everything. That really stinks. Because those people, they need that money. Everyone needs that money. I like money. So if you were to share that information, that could put people at risk. If I shared that information, I am not showing respect for my participants. So again, it comes back to this issue of respect. So what if you wanted to do a study where you were looking at some question, like pot use? Yeah.
If you've been convicted of any drug offense, a misdemeanor or a felony, you're not eligible to receive financial aid.
Beautiful. Thank goodness for cell phone use in the classroom. Thank you. Appreciate it. So there are some things, data can be collected, and like governmental entities can come in with a summons. Maybe it's not a summons, maybe that's the wrong word. But they can, if they go through the right legal hoops, they can request that information. So I have a list of all of the people that participated. These people smoked and these people didn't. And I am given an order, right? A court order to hand over my data. That puts my participants at risk. Is there anything I as an experimenter can do to avoid those risks? Because think about it. Some of the issues that are potentially the most interesting are some of the issues that are going to be the most damaging to someone. There are some issues like we really can't get around. If I want to do a study on pedophilia and ask people if they're doing things, sorry, you tell me yes, I've got to report you. But if I want to do a study about pot use or meth use or any other type of use like that, and I really want to protect my participants, and they're a little paranoid about being found out, what can I do? There's this special thing that's called a certificate of confidentiality. And I can apply for one. And it's given to me by the federal government. And this certificate of confidentiality allows me to give this to the people who are participating. And it basically says, at no point, even if we were to request this information, like we can't get it. The government is barred from ever accessing this information, which is cool. So there are ways that you can do research on really sensitive topics in a way that respects your participants. Okay, so we talked about confidentiality and anonymity, talked about certificate of confidentiality, justice, beneficence, under influence, da-da-da. You guys have questions about ethics? You guys have questions about anything that we've covered so far?
If you get like participants'
Yes.
approval to do something unethical, is it still unethical? Like, are you still not allowed to do it?
What do you mean? If I get their approval to do something
Yeah.
unethical,
Yeah. To them, and they know exactly what's gonna happen, and would you like, that's still not allowed?
Like hand in the ice water.
well, so I think I'm having trouble because I'm very interested in words and how they're used. So if you're saying, okay, if we do something, if we get permission to do something unethical to a participant, does that make it ethical? And I would say no, by definition, it's unethical. Can we do it? Now, I would say that there are things that are potentially questionably ethical that researchers do with participants. We lie to them, we deceive them. But those things that are potentially unethical, deception, right? So lots of religions have statements about lying. You shouldn't do it, that's unethical. How do we get around doing that? When can we lie to our participants? How do we lie to our participants?
You need to keep some of the truth to yourself.
I keep some of the truth to myself. Would there be situations where I would maybe keep all of the truth to myself for a while? I mean, with the
Yeah.
debriefing, at the time that we debrief people, any type of deception should be removed. So when I was in graduate school, I was working in my office one day and I heard someone screaming out in the hall, "You mother, blah, 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 blah." So I went out and like took a look, what's going on? Then I ran and I got a faculty member, so the faculty member could take care of things. And this student had participated in a research project. I forget exactly the specifics about it, but it involved the use of a confederate. You guys know what a confederate is? So what's a confederate?
It's someone who you think is just a regular person, but they're actually non-separate.
Yeah. So confederate is someone who maybe appears to be a participant, but they're not really. So imagine I have two people come into my office or come into my lab to participate in some experiment. You guys both come in. He's actually my lab member. He's working with me on this. And so it's going to be a memory experiment. Okay, hey guys, we're going to do this memory experiment in just a minute. Hold on, I need to go get some, I need to go get something. I need to go to the washroom. I need to do something. I'll be right back. And I leave. And in front of the students or inside that room where it's obvious, there's some money. And they're getting paid at the end of the study, right? So you're going to get $10 or $20 or however many bucks for participating. So you see this money and it's marked, participant payment, whatever. And there's not just the 10 or 20 bucks for you, but there's like maybe 50 bucks there. I leave. What's the experiment? What do they do? What's going to influence their decision? I'm not sure what the independent variable was. Maybe it was the sex of the confederate. Maybe it was number of confederates. Maybe it was the amount of money. Maybe it was exposure to some video that they saw beforehand. I'm not sure, but there was some manipulation that they wanted to see, would this affect someone's willingness to take the money? And in fact, they set the subject up. They didn't just have the money there, but the guy that was working in my lab, because a lot of people, think about it. If you're there and you see that money and you're thinking, geez, I'd like that money. How many of you would be willing to say like, hey, you want to take that and split it? I would guess probably not many of you would. However, if the other person says, hey, you want to take that money and split it? If you were already thinking that, it's like, oh, whew. I'm okay, I can do this. We're on the same page, right? So they entrapped the subjects. The confederate saw, money? Hey, wow, look at this, they left. You want to take this? I'll split it with you. So some of the individuals said yes, and some of them said no. And at that point, the experimenter came back, or the Confederate indicated, you know, actually, this was the experiment. You just did it. I'm one of the experimenters, and we wanted to see if you would take the money or not. And this individual took the money and flipped out. And they were really scared. I mean, think, would you be scared? You just basically like took money. I mean, this happens in the real world with police, right? Hey man, you have any ganja? You've got a Bob Marley shirt. Hey man, you good? Yeah, I'm good. Got anything for me? All right. Bing, you're going to jail, right? So the student could have thought that they were potentially going to go to jail, they were potentially going to get kicked out of school, lots of bad things could potentially happen. So the experimenter was like, no, you know, it's okay. We wanted to see how people would react. This doesn't reflect negatively on you. A lot of people do this, you know, this is how we learn about psychology, but this student freaked out. They were really upset. I forget what had happened to them, but I heard just little snippets, but they were in like a really bad financial situation at the time. And that money would have really helped them out. And they felt horrible. So did we do something unethical? Or did I, not me, I'm just a stupid grad student in my own office having nothing to do with this. Was something unethical done? I would argue, yeah, that's kind of unethical. But the question is, how unethical is it? The Institutional Review Board should not have approved that study unless they thought that what they would have gained from doing this, from deceiving participants, from entrapping participants, would be greater than the negative feelings. And I don't know how many participants were running the study. This was not the first participant. This is the first time that I had heard the freak out. So I would guess that a lot of people were like, what? Oh crap. And then they're told, like, it's okay. I mean, give me the money back, here's your $10. But so a lot of people wouldn't have had a problem with that. But this one person had a huge problem with that, and what did they do? They went and they contacted the head of the IRB, which is why in those videos that you participated in for the research related to my class, it had those links, right? If you feel that your rights as a participant have been violated, then please contact the IRB. Because there are things that we as researchers do that we believe are in the best interests of people in general, that are going to put some people maybe at small risks, at reasonable risks, given the things that we want to learn. But when we're invested in a project, you know, we want this to work, we're not necessarily thinking about it all the way through. And we might not be thinking about that one student who's really desperate for the money, and that's why they're participating in the research in the first place, because they need to eat, right? And we don't think about that situation, and we can end up putting people in a situation that's really bad. And we need that feedback back. Whose ultimate responsibility is the participants' well-being? The researchers. That's it. It's not the Institutional Review Board. The Review Board is supposed to, you know, make sure that the benefits look like they're going to outweigh the costs. But ultimately, when it comes down to the project, the experimenter is in my hands. And I have a duty to stop the experiment if the experiment is causing undue harm or undue stress. Or if there are signs that even though they said they're willing to participate, that it looks like they're not really willing anymore, but they feel like they have to out of some sense of duty. So yeah, the researchers have ultimate control. Does that answer your question, sort of?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it really comes down to a balance. Benefits should outweigh the cost. Anything else? All right, then we will stop here. Enjoy your 9